we are. Father, just ask a blessing over this worship. Let it be like incense risen to you, Lord. And I thank you for the opportunity, Lord, to sing with you and to praise you, Lord, with all of creation, with the angels. We love you, God, so much. And we're grateful to be a part of your plan of creation, Father. And just like Psalms 8:1, O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You have set your glory above the heavens. God, creation has been on our mind this weekend. And you are so beautiful, and your glory surrounds us, God, with what you've made. And you are worthy, Father, of our praises. And we just thank you so much for that. You want to stand, you can go ahead and stand. If you want to dance, Wayne, you can dance. Doesn't matter. What matters is that you are putting the things on your heart, anything that's on your mind that isn't focusing on worshiping the God, putting that aside, and hopefully never picking that back up. And letting God have all of you tonight.
My Jesus, my Savior, Lord, there is none like you. All of my days, I want to praise the wonders of your mighty love. My comfort, my shelter, tower of refuge and strength. Let every breath, all that I am, never cease to worship you. Shout to the Lord, all the earth, let us sing. Power and majesty, praise to the King. Mountains bow down and the seas will roar at the
This next song is called He Reigns, and we've never sang it here before. And it was brought to my attention maybe, let's see, this morning at brunch. And I know I've heard it before, but I didn't remember it. And I was looking, and I looked at the lyrics. I thought, oh, that's an awesome song. It's so cool. We can sing here. And I sent it to Pat, and he's like, is it really like, you don't think this is like, we should sing it? And I was like, oh yeah. And he's like, it's all about like the Amazon like rains and like the Asian believers. And I'm just like, yeah, it's a little different. I was like, oh wait, it's perfect. I was like, the song's all about bringing different nations together as one in one accord and unity. And this Bible study in particular is it's a church group that has been brought together by a bunch of different local churches. It doesn't really matter what our doctrine or not doctrine denomination is here. We all worship Jesus together tonight. And then there's another reason why it's so cool. Well, Kyla's talking about her trip to Africa, and we're talking about the African plain in this song. So like it's like just so perfect. And so it's called He Reigns by the Newsboys. I thank the Lord for the Newsboys. Everything that they've written for us. Prophetic worship. So here we go. It's a song of the redeemed. It's the song of the redeemed, rising from the African plain. It's the song of the forgiven, drowning out the Amazon rain. The song of Asian believers, filled with God's holy fire. Every tribe, every tongue, every nation, a love song born of grateful choir. It's all God's children singing glory, glory, hallelujah, He reigns, He reigns. It's all God's children singing glory, glory, hallelujah, He reigns. Let it rise, blood for winds, caught up in the heavenly sound. Let praises echo from the towers of cathedrals to the faithful gathered underground. Of all the songs sung from the dawn of creation, some were meant to persist. The bells from a thousand steeples, none rings truer than this. It's all God's children singing glory, glory, hallelujah, He reigns, He reigns. It's all God's children singing glory, glory, hallelujah, He reigns, He reigns. It's all God's children singing glory, glory, hallelujah, He reigns, He reigns. It's all God's children singing glory, glory, hallelujah, He reigns, He reigns. And the powers of darkness tremble at what they just heard. Why? 'Cause all the powers of darkness can't drown out a single word. When all God is singing glory, glory, hallelujah, He reigns, He reigns. All God is singing glory, glory, hallelujah, He reigns, He reigns. All God is singing glory, glory, hallelujah, He reigns, He reigns. When all God's people singing glory, glory, hallelujah, He reigns.
Hallelujah, He reigns. He reigns.
Wow, this song is about creation too.
Lord of all creation, of water, earth, and sky, the heavens are your tabernacle. Glory to the Lord on high. God of wonders beyond our galaxy. You are holy, holy. The universe declares your majesty. You are holy, holy. Lord of heaven and earth. Lord of heaven and earth. Early in the morning, I will celebrate the light. When I stumble in darkness, I will call your name by night. God of wonders beyond our galaxy. You are holy, holy. The universe declares your majesty. You are holy, holy. Lord of heaven and earth. Lord of heaven and earth. Hallelujah to the Lord of heaven and earth. Hallelujah to the Lord of heaven and earth. Hallelujah to the Lord of heaven and earth. Wonders beyond our galaxy. You are holy, holy. Precious Lord, reveal your heart to me. Father, holy, holy. The universe declares your majesty. You are holy, 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 holy.
your Holy Spirit that you've placed in us. We're grateful, Father.
For I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. For I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. And I'm totally overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Holy, overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.
Let's pay attention to the words that we're singing.
When I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. Yes, you have. When I felt no worth, you gave it all for me. You have been so, so kind. And overwhelming, never-ending,
popular song nowadays. I just love the message behind it. It's all about God's overwhelming love that just has captured our hearts. And while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And there's nothing we can do to deserve it. But still he gives his life away to us. And there is no greater love than one who would lay down their life for another. And we just thank you, Jesus, for that.
Lord, I thank you for Kyla and her obedient heart to you. Help us all remember, Father, that Kyla isn't presenting about some vacation she went on, all the cool stuff that happened, but this is a calling that she has on her life from the Lord Jesus Christ, who is the King of Kings, Lord. And please help us remember, Lord, that this is to encourage us in our walks, to remind us that you are moving in other places besides Petoskey, Father. Please bless her as she presents. May she do it with honesty and integrity and obedience to you. May our hearts be open, and we thank you for her willing heart and the example she is to us. Please bless this evening. It's all yours, Lord, in Jesus' name.
If you don't know me, my name is Kyla, which they've said it many times, so I'm sure you know me. If you haven't met me, it's probably because I've been gone for 5 months. And so now I'm going to share a little bit about what I did during my trip. I was in Mazatlan, Mexico. I was working with an organization called YWAM, and YWAM is an acronym that stands for Youth with a Mission, and they're a global organization. They have bases all over, and they're really just about pulling people into the mission field, training them up, and then sending them out to different nations to really just bring God's kingdom to earth. And so what I was doing was something called the WISE School, and YWAM has a lot of acronyms, so WISE is an acronym, and it stands for Worship, Intercession, Spiritual Warfare, and Evangelism. So those are the 4 things that I was studying while I was gone. The school is divided up into 2 parts. There is the 3-month teaching, lecture phase part, and then the 2-month part where we went out into the nations and kind of put everything that we learned into practice. I also wanted to say, if you guys have any questions as I'm talking, feel free to ask them, because if you want to know more about something. I'm not really going to spend a lot of time talking about what I learned, because there's so much and I couldn't narrow it down, so I'm going to more focus on the ministry part of it, and if you want to know more about the teaching, I can share with you personally later on, if that's cool. Yeah, so I was at the base in Mexico, and the next picture is of what classes looked like. My school, there's about 28 students, and they were from, I think, 8 different nations, and the base is really big. There's about, on average, 170 people that live there, and then also they're from about maybe 27 different nations from around the globe, all gathered together just to learn more about God and also bless the local community there. And so, yeah, we would have classes, and then we would also go out and put what we learned into practice. So this is a picture. one of the days we were like, we're going to go up to this lighthouse that's nearby. It's on top of this little mountain, and you hike up it. And it's like a really popular tourist destination. So seeing as our school focuses a lot on worship and on intercession and also on evangelism, we went up there and we just had like a little worship session on top of this little mountain that overlooked the whole city. And we took time to like pray over the city. And then we were like, hey, since we're here, let's talk about Jesus. So one of the guys was like, I'm going to share my testimony to all these people. So he just got up there in the middle of all these people looking over the city and just started sharing his testimony, telling them about Jesus, how God had completely transformed his life. Super cool. This is like stuff that we would do every week, a couple times a week. Just go out into the streets in different places and do different things. One time we did like a worship flash mob in the middle of the streets in Mexico. Super cool, super random, but it was a good way to draw people in, and then afterwards we dispersed and started talking with them and just sharing our stories with them and telling them about Jesus. And it's amazing. The people in Mexico are very, very open and always listening for like, oh, you want to talk to me? Sure, let's talk. Like super relational, love it when you talk to them. We also would, once a week, we had ministry, and so the base in Mexico, in Mazatlan, has multiple different ministries that go out into the community and do different things, and we had the choice to choose what ministry we wanted to be involved with. So I prayed about it, and I felt God was telling me to do immigrant ministry. So this is actually super crazy, and being from the States, we can kind of relate to it a little bit. So what it is we would go to the railroad tracks, and there's all these people. They're typically coming from southern Mexico, Central America, Nicaragua, Guatemala, Honduras, places like that, and they get on these little like cargo trains. They'll just climb on top of them, and then they'll travel like multiple miles for like probably 2 weeks plus, just sitting on top of this train, and their goal is, most of them, to make it to the States so that they can get a job and support their family. A lot of them, they are coming in illegally, but most of them, their journey is super hard. The first state, I mean, Mexico's not exactly known for their safety and so the first state that they enter into, if they're coming from Central America, a lot of them will oftentimes get robbed, or like all their stuff will be taken away from them, the money that they brought with them, the supplies. So now they have no food, they have no water, they have no money, and they're just sitting on top of these trains, and it's super dangerous if they a lot of times if they fall asleep, depending on what sort of train they're on top of, they could fall off and potentially lose their life, or most of them will lose their limbs. It happens a lot, it's very common. And a lot of them, like, they have this dream to like make it to the States or to do something with their life, because where they're coming from is not good, and they don't have a way to support their family, and this is why they're going. And so we would have this opportunity to just, once a week, we'd go to the railroad tracks, we'd walk up and down, and we'd just look for people who had like maybe taken a break, gotten off the train, and were just waiting for the next train to pass through. We would bring them water, bring them sandwiches, and then as we handed it to them, we'd be like, hey, so the reason why we're doing this is because we love Jesus, and he loves you, and he sees you, he notices you, he knows your dream, and he has a plan for your life, and he wants to get to know you. And we just share about Jesus with them. And it was also like the train tracks, it was kind of dangerous because it was a big like drug place with drug deals, like a lot of that going on in the railroad place that we would go to. And so sometimes there wasn't, depending on the week, sometimes there would be a lot of people, other times just a few. And so we would talk with local people as well as reach out to them. And so this is a picture of one time we were there. There were 30 people from Honduras, and most of them are men. Sometimes there's a few ladies, but there were several 15-year-old boys on this. You know, they don't have food, they don't have water, hardly, maybe a little bit of money, but not a lot. And so they've been traveling for, I think, almost 2 weeks at this point, and we just met with them, and you know, they're dirty, they're hungry, and so we gave them all water. Sometimes we would have little, like, the Gospel of John, and we pass it out to them so they can read it while they're on the train. It was really cool. They all gathered together. One of the guys on our team actually preached to them a message, and of course it's in Spanish so they can understand it, because they all speak Spanish, and so really cool. It was super crazy just to see all these people and to realize that like all of them are literally putting their life on the line just so that they can have a future, or at least what they think is a future. And so many of them, like when they get to the States, either they can't enter or they find it worse and they end up getting sent back. So a lot of times what they go through is really for nothing. It's really sad, but it's cool because we had an opportunity to just plant the seed of hope and say, hey, like, God sees your dreams, but he has something even bigger if you choose to pursue him and develop a relationship with him. There was this guy, he had actually lived by the railroad tracks for 2 years. His name's Vincent. Let's see. That's right there. So we actually, because it wasn't just my school, like the base has been doing this ministry for a long time, and so the school before me, they had built a relationship with him. They led him to Christ. He was baptized while I was there, which was super, super incredible. And then every week after that, we would have like a couple of us would go to his little house, which was just like a couple boards that he put up, and we brought him some supplies, built up his house for him, and we would go and we'd do a Bible study with him every week and kind of like disciple him because, you know, he didn't know that much, but, you know, we led him to Christ and we discipled him, and he had a hernia, and we found a hospital that gave free surgeries, and we were able to transport him and take him, and he had surgery done, and it was super cool.
Wow.
Totally God, right? Yeah, so that's a picture of us doing the Bible study, and then that's him at the hospital before his surgery, so it was really cool. Okay, so that was just like a few of the things that I did while I was in Mexico. And then after the 3 months there, we went out, and so this is my outreach team. Our school split up into 2 different teams, and so this is my team, and we have multiple nations. So these are my school leaders, and they have 4 kids, all under the age of 5. And they all traveled with us over to Europe and to Africa. Super crazy, but super cool. And there's so many different nations and cultures just represented in my outreach team. There's one time we were leading worship, and the 4 of us that were leading worship, we got together and we're like, we're going to pray beforehand. And we all prayed, and all 4 of us were praying in a different language, and we were all from different countries. And the only thing that brought us together was Jesus. The only thing. Like, if we hadn't met Jesus, we would have never met each other. And it was super cool because when you see people from so many different places, and you're all there, and it's like your family, but each one of them comes from a different place, they speak an entirely different language, and yet somehow you can communicate, and you're family. It's the most incredible thing. I mean, I know here in America, like, we have a few nations represented up here, but when you go somewhere else and there's people from all over, you learn so much because there's so much, like, richness in culture, and in every place that you go to, in every culture, there's this incredible gem that's in there, and it's like God places part of him in the culture. You might have to dig for it in some places because it might be buried up by stuff that the enemy's done, but you can find this treasure, and it's something that you can take with you, and you take it and you're like, wow, I'm going to take this into my culture because this is part of the kingdom culture, you know? And so you bring a little bit of your culture to the places you go to, and then you also take back some of their culture. It's super cool. Yeah, so this is my team, and the first... So this is the first place that we went to. We went to Europe. We went to 2 different countries in Europe. We went to the Netherlands and then also to Spain. And we went to 2 different cities in each place, and we stayed about a week long in each city. So what we would do while we were in Europe, it was a lot of really just encouraging the church, because when you're in a place for such a short time, like, I don't know, some people wonder, what can you do if you're only there for a week, right? What sort of impact can you have? But we would come alongside the local church, and we would teach them everything that we learned, and we'd basically give them the tools and equip them and say, hey, this is how you do it. Now come with us, we'll show you how to do it, and then we're going to leave it in your hands. We would lead worship a lot. This picture of us. Lead worship because, you know, that's the best way to just honor God and bring his presence to the nation. So we led worship multiple places, probably in every city that we went to in Europe. We would lead worship at churches, sometimes we would go to YWAM bases, lead it. When we were in Amsterdam, we worked with the Tabernacle is what it was called, and it's like right in the red light district, and they have worship during the day for several hours and then prayer times. And so we would lead that, we would lead worship, lead the prayer time, and then go out onto the streets and just do evangelism. It was super cool because a lot of the pastors, especially in the Netherlands, because the church is super dry, super religious. Like actual spirit-filled, Bible-believing churches are very few and far between, especially in the smaller villages, which we went to a small village in the Netherlands. And so a lot of times the pastors are very discouraged and they're very tired because it's such a heavy atmosphere there, and they're tired of seeing like hardly anyone come to their church and seeing all these people just following religion and going to all these like really dead churches, and they're super discouraged. And we were able to just come alongside them and say, hey, like, you can do this, God's so proud of you, keep going, you know, and just encourage them and let them just open up their hearts to us and be vulnerable. And then we were able to pray with them and really just set their church on fire, especially in regards to evangelism. There were so many times where we would take the church with us to evangelize and show them, like, this is how you do it, you know? Yeah, so the next picture is actually, so these two girls are actually from Iran. I think, yeah, they're from Iran, and they're refugees. And their mom, she became a Christian while she was in Iran, and she, you know, her family's Muslim, and she was afraid if she stayed, she was going to get killed because she got caught with the Bible, and so she had to flee. So she took her 2 daughters and fled the country, and it was super cool. Like, they just bought a house, the government gave them a house, and they were painting it, fixing it up because it was pretty bad, and so we got to go help them paint and all this. But the coolest thing was we spent time just listening to their story, and their story is crazy. Like, these 2 girls, when they were in one of the refugee camps, waiting to find out if they got like a yes or no to enter into Europe, they were waiting, and they said it was super bad. Like, these girls, like, they saw guys killing each other, crazy things like that, super sad, yet they're so like full of joy because they know that Jesus is their hope, and he's the reason that they're in a safe town with people that love them, with a community of believers, and it's so cool. And so we just got to play with the kids, talk to the mom, hear her story, and it was so crazy just to know that in this little town in the Netherlands there's this family from Iran that's loves Jesus and is fleeing so much. Like, we don't even realize how blessed we have it here, especially when you hear about stories like that. Like, they're so, like, they don't have any freedom, and we're so free here. And so just hearing their story was crazy and super cool, just to be able to bless that family and really encourage them. And I think we really encouraged the mom as well, so it was really cool. Okay, so this is another church when we were in Spain, leading worship there. We actually went to a lot of different churches throughout the week that we were in Madrid. We went to a lot of different churches. We would preach, lead worship, teach them what we learned as well. And then, yeah, so this is me teaching. I was teaching on the spiritual gifts, and it's really cool just to see how open they are and how hungry they are. Like, the people in Europe that believe in Jesus, they're so hungry for something more. They're like, a lot of what they experience is very dead, and they don't really know, like, oh wow, like, this is what it actually means to be in love with Jesus. And so we had an opportunity, even just by like living our lives, for them to see like this fire that was inside of us. And when you have that fire, it's so contagious, and you're like, look, God did this in me, and he wants to do it in you, but not just you, he wants to do it in the whole community. So let's like get on fire and then go out to the streets and just share this love. And it was so cool. Like, the next picture is us out on the streets doing evangelism, and these two guys right here, they're from the church that we were working with. And so we were like, come on, let's go. And we took a huge group from the church out into the streets, and we were like, okay, this is how we're going to do it this time. Every time we did evangelism, it looked a little bit different because we would ask God for a strategy of like, what do these people need in this city, and how can we open them up to hear the gospel? So we took them out and we're like, hey, like, let's do this. And it was so crazy because at first, these guys, they were so nervous. They're like, I can't talk to people, like, I can't do this. And then after, like, I did it, I went up to someone, started talking to them, they started opening up about their story, and then I shared my story. I'm like, oh, that's not too bad. And then they'd be like, I'm going to go up to this person and do it, and I'm going to go up to this person and do it. And it's like, like it was so contagious, them seeing like, it's not that hard, I can actually do this. And in every place that we went, the people afterwards, they'd say, hey, like, we went on this missions trip and the things that you taught us, we used it. Or like, our church, like the pastors would say, our church is so on fire, like, they're, like, it's so crazy, like, to see them continuing out everything that you taught, everything that you showed us. So incredible to, like, for us to hear that, be like, wow, like, the impact that we made, it wasn't just, like, that 1 week, but it carried on because they're doing, like, we equipped them with these tools, and now they're using those tools, and they're bringing change in a way that we couldn't bring it in the short time. But what we did was what, like, set the ball rolling for what happened next. Okay. So, second place we went to outside of Europe was in North Africa, to Morocco. And Morocco was a little bit different because it's a Muslim nation and it's illegal to evangelize. It's illegal to, you know, try to convert people. Completely illegal. We'd probably get kicked out of the country if they knew that we were doing it. So we had to be a little bit more careful. When we were in Spain, we had one of the weeks we worked with YWAM base that does a lot of ministry in North Africa, and they trained us on how do you reach Muslims? What is the culture like? How do you be effective in a place that's very closed? So I'm going to share a few stories. Basically, a lot of what we would do would just be going out into the streets and looking for opportunities to build relationship. They love people, they love relationships, they love just, it's crazy. Like, you can go out on the street and within an hour, you find yourself invited to someone's home for dinner, for lunch, whatever. It's super easy, they're so relational, and they love hearing about, like, different nations. Like, oh, you're from America, you're from Mexico, what? That's so cool. Like, I want you to come over so I can practice my English with you, you know? Yeah, so this was just a picture of the streets, and then we went into one of the places, and this was actually, we were staying at an Airbnb, and the people that rented it out, they lived in the apartment, or in the floor right above us, and they would often come down, or we'd go up and talk with them, and so they, the mom wouldn't let us take a picture of her face, because it's not allowed depending on what they believe, and so this is a picture of her making bread. And it's really interesting because in Morocco you can see, like, the levels of like Islam. They have a lot of European influence there, and so in the older generation they're very strict. They pray 5 times a day, they go to the mosque to pray 5 times a day. Super intense, super strict, super, like, dedicated to their faith, but a lot of the younger people, they don't so much. Like, they're like, it's just, you know, part of my like ethnicity, like, I'm Moroccan, I'm Muslim, but they don't really believe it. And a lot of the younger people are very open. Like, if you shared about Jesus, they'd be very open and ready to be like, wow, what's that like? What's it like to have a relationship with God? Like, I don't really believe in Islam at all. Like, I'm just Muslim because I'm Moroccan, you know? So they're very open, very curious. And so we actually went to a mosque, and the mosque that we went to, it's the second largest mosque in all of Africa. It's I think the 13th largest in the whole world. So it's a huge mosque. It's really huge, and there's, like, all these tourists that come in. This was in Casablanca in Morocco, and so we went there, and, you know, we couldn't go inside because you have to be, like, fully clothed with, like, the head scarf on and everything to enter in, and mostly men go into the mosques, not so much women, but there's, like, a big area outside, and so we were just kind of, okay, God, we're here, we're going to pray, what do you want us to do? And so we just sat down and just kind of, we're just going to wait and see what God does. And within, there were 4 of us girls together, and we were sitting there waiting for God to do something, and there's this girl sitting across from us, and she's like, hey, you speak English, where are you from? And so we started a conversation with her. We went over, we met her name's Latifa. We're like, oh, this is cool, all right. So her little sister was with her, but she didn't speak any English, so we couldn't really talk to her. And so she invited herself to lunch with us because we were going to eat lunch. So we walked to McDonald's, got lunch with her, all this stuff. She kept talking. She's like, hey, I want you guys to come over to my house and meet my family, and I want to feed you stuff, you know. We can make, like, couscous, which is, like, a traditional Moroccan food. Let's make couscous. So she invited us over, and so the next picture is, so this is Latifa, and then that's her little sister. And the whole time we were there, the first day when we first met her, her little sister was super serious. Like, that's her smiling, but she didn't smile. Like, we were with her maybe for 3+ hours, and she didn't smile at all. Super serious, didn't talk. So we're like, Latifah, is she always like this? And Latifah's like, yeah, all the time. You know, and you could tell, like, she was very, I don't know, like, wounded and very insecure. And so, a few days later, we went over to Latifah's house, and she lives in a very small house, super small, and you know, it's her whole family. So her mom, her dad, her brother, her sister, and then both her parents' moms. So her 2 grandmas live with them, and the only one that spoke English was Latifah. But we went there and we just sat with them, and they cooked us food. And so this is a picture of her family. You can see, like, this is her dad. And her dad's super traditional Muslim. He actually left to go to the mosque to pray while we were there. That's her mom, and then her grandma. And her grandma, they were super funny. They didn't speak any English, so we could communicate, but she was like telling us jokes in Arabic, and it was funny even though we had no clue what she was saying. But it was crazy because they were like, don't leave. Like, we don't want you to leave. Just stay. Like, you can spend the night. Like, we'll make room for you. You can sleep on the couch here, you know? They didn't want us to leave because they felt something different when we were there. They were like, these people are different. And before we left, we actually were like, can we pray for you guys? Like, it's just a part of our culture and who we are. Like, we believe in Jesus and we want to pray for you. And it's a little bit awkward because the dad, he was like, I don't know about this because, you know, he's very strong Muslim, but we were able to just pray for them and bless them, and we did it in the name of Jesus, so they knew, like, we were Christian and they knew what we believed, even though we couldn't really evangelize with them in their house. But then we have, like, their numbers and we keep in contact, and they're always like, her brother is like asking questions like, what do you believe? Like, do you want to hear the Quran? And then like we would send him worship songs and stuff like that. So he's super curious, and it was just incredible to see how, even though we couldn't really speak the language and we couldn't communicate very clearly, how much they were impacted by us, and just by us being willing to just love on them and to just spend time with them. And this wasn't the only place that we went. We went to another people. We were actually in the marketplace, and God told us to buy dates. So we're buying dates, and this lady turns around and starts talking in English, and is like, hey, you want to come over for tea? And so we go over to her house for tea, and she ends up feeding us breakfast, and her son and her whole family, like her son is visiting from Paris and all this stuff. And so what happens is, she's like, she told us this after. She's like, wow, these people are really nice. I don't want them to leave yet. Maybe I should invite them for dinner. So she invites us for dinner, and we're like, okay. So this is traditional in Morocco. Like, all the family come over. Like grandmas, aunts, uncles, cousins. Every day they eat meals together. They go to different people's houses and they cook food together, they eat together. It's like a big family gathering. So we're sitting there, and like all this family starts coming in. Neighbors, friends, all these people just come in, and we're like, oh, we're gonna meet the whole family. Yeah, it was super crazy. And this is just some random lady that we met in the markets, you know? She has no clue who we are, we have no clue who she is, and here we are eating dinner with her family, and it was like this 4-course meal, and it was super cool. And we got to talk to the son because he spoke English really well, and so we were saying, like, our dream is to, like, share God's love with the whole world, you know? And he was like, oh, that's a really good dream, like, maybe I should do something better with my life, you know? And so we just had an opportunity just to love on them, and to just bring an aspect of God's character to them that they don't normally see. Because in Islam, their God is not all loving. He's just like this God that's mean, and like they have to please him, and it's all about obeying the rules so that you get into heaven, hopefully. But in a Muslim nation, sometimes it's even the smallest things that make the hugest difference, because a lot of them have very twisted ideas of Christianity, of what you believe, what Christians are like. They see Hollywood, and that's what they think a Christian is, more or less. So by us, even just by us being there, it's like they look at us and they're like, wow, these people are American. They're probably Christian, because they think all Americans are Christian. So they're probably Christian, and wow, they're so nice. And we followed like a very modest dress code to try to fit into their culture. And so they look at us and be like, wow, like they dress decently, they they're super nice. This isn't not at all what I pictured a Christian to be like. And it just kind of like sparks this curiosity in them. And even by us not even doing anything, just by us being there, even if we don't say Jesus, it's still like, it's like taking them from like facing away from the cross and getting them to turn around. Even if they're so far away, just by them turning around, then they can start their journey that gets them closer. And so that's a lot of what we did. And as far as the little sister that's in this picture, you know, I said she was very serious, and at the end I gave her a bracelet and her face literally lit up. It was like a completely different person coming out, and you could tell like she didn't want us to leave, and she felt something different. She felt loved by us, and it was so incredible just to see the difference. Like we spent maybe 3 hours at their house, and just in that short of a time, it was like they didn't want us to leave. Like we were family. Like they felt like we were family. It was incredible just to see that. And yeah, so let's see the next picture. This is what they fed us. It's called couscous. It's like kind of like rice and has like pumpkin, parsnips, chicken, peppers, and the way you eat it, they just put like this big dish in the middle of the table, and you eat it with your hand. Traditionally, we got spoons, but you eat like the little. It's like even though it's one big thing and you all eat from the same dish, you imagine like a slice of pizza in front of you, and you eat from that slice. And you put it in your hand, and then you like scoop it, and you form it into a little ball, and then you take the ball and eat it. That's how you do it. It's super cool. Like we actually, they showed us that this is how you traditionally do it. You know, so it's really cool. So that was just a short version of like everything that happened. Because obviously I couldn't tell you everything. It was an incredible time. I think that God definitely used us to really set things into motion, to really change the places that we went to. And I wanted to share something that God taught me. And the first week of lectures, the first week that I left home and went to Mexico, it was focused on worship, and they talked a lot about obedience and how worship really is about obedience. And so I thought it'd be cool, we should read some scripture, and after going to the ark and seeing how like we take it back to the beginning, I thought we should go back to Genesis, right? Yeah. All right, yeah. So we're going to turn to Genesis chapter 22, and I don't know, hopefully you guys brought your Bibles. I mean, it has to be scripture and everything, right? Because God's word is so powerful. Okay. So, it's Genesis chapter 22, and it's the story of Abraham and Isaac, and how God says, okay, I want you to sacrifice Isaac. We're going to read verse 5. Okay. So Genesis chapter 22, verse 5. And it says, Then Abraham said to his young men, Stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you. Okay, so this is him, like they're up on the mountain, he's getting ready to sacrifice Isaac, and he tells his men, like, okay, stay here, I'm going to go, I'm going to sacrifice my son, but what does he call it? Worship. So how is, like, it's not really what we think of worship, right? A lot of times we think of worship, we think singing songs, which is a form of worship, but there's so much more to it. And one of the biggest ways of worship is radical obedience to God. Like when God says do something and you obey. And this is what Abraham is doing. God says do something. It's hard, it's crazy, it's not anything that I would do, you know, to give up my only son, and not just my only son, but like this is God's promise. And I don't know if God's ever promised you something and then said, even though I promised you, I want you to give up that promise. I want you to sacrifice it. Super crazy, right? And he calls it worship. He calls it worship. And that's really what worship is. It's obedience, you know? If God asks you to do something, our answer should be yes right away. And there's a quote in this song, and it says, simple obedience changes history. So true. It's so true. Like when you say yes to God, even in the most simplest thing, that's what changes history. That's what makes a difference. And it doesn't have to be something super crazy like, okay, Amanda, I want you to move to Africa and be a missionary. Or, you know, Sarah, you're going to go to China and you're going to teach English to these kids. You know, like God asked Katie to do that, right? But it doesn't have to be that. It could be as simple as, hey, Teresa, why don't you go talk to this person over here, you know? Just start a conversation with them. You know, whatever. Super simple. But if our answer isn't yes, then we're in disobedience and we're in sin, you know? And obedience is really what changes things. If you obey God in everything, whether big or small, that's what is going to change the world. And that's where you're going to see these crazy stories and see like things changing, and not just outside but in yourself as well. Because when you obey God, you're so fulfilled, you know? But the thing is, one other thing, if you're not listening to God, how can you obey? If you don't hear what He is asking you to do, how are you going to know to do it? So I want to challenge you guys with 2 questions. One, what is God asking you to do? Take time, sometime, soon, to really listen to Him and say, hey God, what do you want me to do? And then 2, are you being obedient? Are you doing it? You know?
Good
and it all goes down to like intimacy with Him and spending time with Him and taking time to listen and to ask Him, even in everything, as you go throughout your day, saying, okay God, like, what do you want me to do? Like, I could do this, but maybe you want me to do something else. And just being so sensitive to His voice, and then not just hearing it, but then obeying. Hear and obey, right? That's all He asks from us, and that's what's really going to make the biggest difference. And that's my life. That's what happened the last 5 months, is me just listening to God and obeying Him and everything. That's our outreach was mostly, God, what do you want us to do today? Okay. You know, maybe He would change our plan, say, I want you to do this. And we're like, okay, sure, why not? You know, let's do it, you know? And that's when you see the craziest things happen, is when you take time to listen to what He has and then obey. And then crazy things happen. So, yeah, I would love to, like, share more with you on a personal level of what God talked to me, because I just covered a little bit, but that's what I've got.
Anybody have any questions for Kyla?
Yeah, that's good.
Well, I have questions. In the beginning of the story, you said you would bring people on the trains, food and water. Where did you get your supplies from?
We would, each one of the people that came, we would have to bring like $1 to it, and then we would go to Walmart, and depending on how much money we had that day, who could afford it, who couldn't, because a lot of the students are really struggle financially, we would just go to Walmart and buy a simple sandwich and water.
So how did you financially, did you have missionary money to do this trip to help you?
Yeah, I had to fundraise all of it. I worked to save up for half of it, and then I sent out support letters to get some funding so that I could do it.
Special person, special lady.
Well, Kyla, you stole some of my thunder from next week, because next week I was going to preach on how obedience is worship. That was literally my topic for next week. So that's okay.
By next week we'll need a preaching on that.
She was leading.
No, it's awesome because she's 100% right. I was talking to Connor and Andrew a little bit about it too, because we label, all right, once we're done worshiping, we'll do our teaching tonight, or we're going to do our prayer requests and then we'll worship. And it's this crazy thing, and I know we don't mean literally like this is the only time we worship. It's just this thing we have in our Christian vocabulary.
All right, we're getting ready to worship here. Everyone ready to worship? We weren't worshiping earlier, so yeah.
I am so glad you pulled that scripture out, because I never looked at it like that. And what I wanted to get across to the group next week was, you're getting my teaching now. Was that it's so easy to get when Connor's jamming and we're jamming and everyone's got their arms lifted, and please continue to do it, but you get that buzz, and that's when, and as soon as the song's over and it kind of dies out halfway through home group, and then you kind of start falling asleep by the end of my message, and then everybody goes out to their day. I get it, and it's the most exciting part of the night is usually in the middle of worship. For most of us in here, it probably is. It's when we feel the most, and that's what we've labeled as worship. And Kyla's 100% right when she says that Abraham went and worshipped and he was being obedient to God. And if you really want to worship God and say that you worship God, listen to Him and be obedient to Him. When the devil's telling you to do something you shouldn't do, don't do it. When God's telling you to do something you should do, do it. Amen. And you might think that worship is when Connor's playing his piano, but God thinks worship is when He tells you to witness to somebody and you do it.
Hey Pat, borrow that up there.
Oh, can I use this for next week? No, I had another idea in mind for next week, and it actually has something to do with Muslims, so it's cool that you talked about that. Are you preparing for something?
Yes, we are.
There's my teacher.
Does anyone have any more questions for Kyla or Pat?
What was the? You said there was a terminology you used when you went in. You learned a bunch of steps, and it was you first gave us YWAM, and then you said there was another acronym. What was that?
WISE.
What was it?
WISE.
WISE. W-I-S.
WISE. Worship, intercession, spiritual warfare,
Worship.
What was the spiritual one? Spiritual what?
spiritual warfare,
Warfare.
worship,
Yeah.
intercession, spiritual warfare, and evangelism. So that's what I was studying.
Thank you, Kyla. Thank you.
All right.
Connor's going to explain the connection of this song to Overland. Because I'm sure there is one.
We were talking about creation, and this song is not only is it just have a special meaning to this group, but the song really it really talks about the history of the Lord and the days of Elijah and declaring the word of the Lord, and these are the times of your servant Moses, righteousness being restored. So yeah, there we go. So if we could have someone run the slides, anyone, Nate, thank you. So we're just gonna sing this last song together. Maybe someone that wasn't here to sing, so let's give them a chance to.
These are the days of Elijah, declaring the word of the Lord. And these are the days of your servant Moses, righteousness being restored. And these are the days of great trial, of famine and darkness and sorrow. These are the voice in the desert cry, preparing the way of the Lord. Behold, He comes, riding on the cloud, shining like the sun. That trumpet calls, so lift your voice to hear jubilee, and out of Zion till salvation comes. And these are the days of Ezekiel, the trials becoming as flesh. And these are the days of the servant David, rebuilding the temple of praise. And these are the days of the harvest, the fields are as white in the world. And these are the laborers in your vineyard, declaring the word of the Lord. Riding on the clouds, shining like the sun. That trumpet calls, lift your voice to hear a jubilee, and out of Zion till salvation comes. There's no God like Jehovah. 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 Behold, He comes, riding on the clouds, shining comes, before He comes, riding on the clouds, shining like the sun. At trumpet calls, so lift your voice, the year of Jubilee, and out of Zion till salvation comes. Before He comes, riding on the clouds, shining like the sun. At trumpet calls, so lift your voice, the year of Jubilee, and out of Zion till salvation comes. So lift your voice, the year of Jubilee, and out of Zion till salvation
Well, I'm just going to pray us out. Oh, Kyla, do you mind praying us out?
I'd love to.
Thanks.
Okay. Father, thank you so much for who you are. Thank you so much just for how majestic you are and yet how much you care about each one of us individually, Father. God, I thank you so much just that you're so willing to speak to us, Father, and that if we listen to you, God, you show us crazy things and use us to really just change the world and to make it a better place and to just bring people into your kingdom, Father. And I just pray, God, for each one of these beautiful people that are here, and that you would just bless them throughout their week, God, and that we would just be so, always be listening to you and ready for whatever you have for us. And yeah, Jesus, you're so good. Thank you so much. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right. Well, be blessed in the name of the Lord.
Okay.
And you guys are dismissed. And thank you, Kyla, for everything that you've said tonight.